Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. The title is somehow truncated, but anyway, this is the title I want. Okay. So, hold on, let me see. How does this work? Okay. I somewhat had a little slightly different expectation. So this is an academic talk. I could have given an overview, but anyway, here we go. So you're going to see some differential equations and all that. So, but I'll try to keep it intuitive. So by all means, let me know, give me some eye contact if this is completely far-fetched. Okay, all right, so let's get going. This is joint work with Jingqiang and Shengxing. I'm on leave from Colombia. I'm here in this beautiful city. It's a lot of fun. Okay, for this audience, it's pretty obvious, but let me just set the stage so we know the main issues that we're going to look into, okay? We're going to talk about platforms. Of course, you have centralized platforms like Alibaba, Taobao, and Amazon, and you have decentralized platforms, which is what we are interested in this conference. Of course, especially on decentralized platforms, token, of course, is at the front and the center, right? Transactions are settled in tokens, you know, deals are done, contracts are written with all the transfers and so on in tokens, native tokens. Of course, in principle, you could also imagine centralized platforms have tokens too. You know, they're less popular, they're less discussed, but anyway, they have that too. So what we want to do in this paper, so I'm going to give you a quick example, just let you know what we have in mind, and then I'm going to use models to tell stories. What do I mean by that? We call that quantitative storytelling. We're going to use models. What do models do? That sort of make what you say very precise. Sometimes, as great as English is, you know, as you start talking, things get a little loose, and it's all not very tight. I want to mention this chain link. Some of you probably know this blockchain. So it's a very simple idea. If you want to write contracts, and you need contingencies, right? Contracts have to be contingent on something. To the extent you care about the real world, you need to bring real world event, your real world information onto the blockchain. So that means data, okay? So what Chainlink does is the business model. It takes a bunch of real world data and the events. You know, we have a lot of great computer scientists here. You turn that into, I guess, Oracle. And then you shuffle that, you put on the chain, that's the network with the hexagons. And then any blockchain in the middle can call the database, which is now on-chain, and conduct transactions, right? Okay, so it's just a pretty obvious, intuitive idea. And I want you to have this blockchain as example in your mind when I take you through heavy math. Not really. I'm not going to just talk through the heavy math, but the math will be on the screen because that's what it is. Okay, so, all right, so I'm sure you say, what is this Q theory? Unless you're trained as an economist, you surely have never heard of Q theory. It's just a letter that we coined it, going back to James Tobin, one of the giants in our profession back into the 1970s. I'll give you a little background if time permits. So Q theory is just a fancy word, or you know, what economists call Q theory, just the way we think about capital accumulation, resource accumulation. We use accumulated capital, think about, you know, in the real world, bricks and mortar, in your own life, human capital. These are capital, right? So that generate cash flows. So whenever you have some environment where capital accumulation, right, capital is something that's a stock, Okay, then you have a queue model, essentially. That's all that really is. So put simply, I'm going to tell you what types of capital we have on the platform and how you actually accumulate that as a community, all right? Now, what is search and matching? That's another question you probably have in mind. It's like, well, the two key phrases already are sort of alien, right? So search and matching is what they literally mean. Think about the marriage market. I think that probably can keep you a little bit up at the 5 o'clock in the evening, in the afternoon. So it's about most markets where you don't know what you want, and you don't know who is going to give you things that you want, so you're going to have to actually look around and find what you, go shopping, right? That's what it is. You shop, you find certain things you like, you stop, right? So that's a search process, and matching means there's a buyer, there's a seller. Now think about Chainlink. Who are the sellers? Node operators, data collectors, data processes, right? So those people that, okay, so that provide data. So they're sellers, they're selling their services, okay? If you write a smart contract contingent on, let's say volatility of certain options is 25% implied vol based on some sort of option pricing formula such as Black-Scholes, you're calling that data, okay? And the data provider is the seller. And you, the one who is calling that, of course, is the buyer, okay? It's going to be some, of course, on blockchain, you're going to settle that transactions using tokens, okay? All right. So why, of course, at the core of economics is all about gains from trade. Why do we have buyers and sellers? Because we are both better off, right? If you're rational, both sides are better off. So that's the, Econ 101, okay? So now let me just review what you're going to see. I'm sure we're going to be lost in details. So let me just say what you're going to see. The model you're going to see is designed to capture the following story or real-world phenomena. A bunch of folks on blockchain anonymous. They have demand, they have supply. Some people are suppliers, some people are buyers. And then we're going to operate on this decentralized platform anonymously via marketplace using tokens as media of exchange. But as a buyer, I don't really know who the seller I want, so I'm going to have to spend some time and carry my tokens in order to get ready for the transactions that I anticipate that's going to happen down the road. Okay? So now think about the community. Okay, if you were the designer, right? Vitalik was here earlier, or other blockchain. The designer has a design problem. Okay, they're gonna have community capital, right? People that speaking of network effect, it's capital formation. Community is a form of capital. Okay, now you're gonna have to accumulate buyers and the sellers. If it's a two-sided market, you don't want the market to be too off the balance. You don't want to have one buyer, 1,000 sellers. Now, what seller's going to do? And vice versa. So you want some sort of balanced growth over time. Okay? Now, here's something actually also mentioned multiple times in today's talk, which is adoption versus acquisition. A platform such as Chainlink can acquire users. They can go around and say, look, hey, put your data, oracle your data, and put that on my chain. Or you can talk to somebody else and try to get a lot of people come. So that's an acquisition decision by the platform, right? But you also have participation or usage decisions. The fact that I'm on a blockchain does not mean I'm going to actively use it. Right? Even in centralized platforms, we have a lot of users, but we have active users. There's a big difference between users or register count, right, and actually active users. So that means if you think about this at the conceptual level, what you really need is a model that captures the following key features. One, it's two-sided market. You got buyers on one side, sellers on the other side. And buyers and sellers, they're not exogenous. They can actually grow over time in their own interest. Of course, if the platform, by doing airdrops, okay, can attract users, but they only attract users, but degree of how much users actually will use the platform, of course, depending on their own interest. So think about decentralization, okay? Think about how economy works. All right, let me see if I got everything here. Okay, so tokenomics, okay, so this is where tokens come in, because on the platform, it's like a little tiny kingdom, right, where you have your local currency. And so fundamentally, you need to take what we used to call monetary economics, economics about money, right, a monetary policy, onto the platform. Nowadays, people call it tokenomics, okay, for the obvious reason. So that's the main idea of the paper. Is that reasonable? Okay. And what's nice about blockchain platform is this idea comes up very naturally. Why? Because code is the law, right? So everything's settled in tokens eventually. Okay, so naturally, the blockchain economy fundamentally embeds tokens at the center. That's why it's a very natural to think about it. All right? Okay, sorry about the math, but you can't do this model without math. I'm just going to work you through with English. This is just, I just said this already. If you set up a platform, you say you want to maximize your own value. It doesn't mean you keep 100% tokens to yourself. That doesn't fly, right? Ethereum was what, 10, 40, 50? So that's a design, okay? So think about 10, 40, 50. And then the first term, okay, called seigniorage, is a word from monetary economics. What it means is, so think about this. Every period, right? If you were a rational platform, what do? You issue, okay, that's token issue is DM, okay? That's non-negative. And phi is the dollar price of tokens, right? So by the way, why are we so obsessed, interested in stable coins? Because we need to have a stable exchange rate with respect to the rest of the world, dollars, okay? So presumably we live in the real world. Eventually we care about everything in terms of dollar valuation, okay? So think about phi, the sign-colored object, as exchange rate between the token you're interested and the real world US dollars or Singapore dollars, okay? And then the second term that looks, I guess that's pink-colored or magenta-colored. That just means if you want to get users, just like at Alibaba, you're going to have to burn cash. Okay, you have to do whatever it takes. So that's the second term called acquisition cost of buyers, and what you have to pay to get buyers. Same thing, you can put the sellers. It's just spice image. So as a rational value maximizer, when you design your platform, design your blockchain, what do? You want to maximize that. You want to maximize money you make and the cost you incur. You do the present value, right? That's the integral. And the E is simply the expected value because future is random. And then the bottom two equations, all that really says, this is the Q theory, okay? Just means you can buy buyers. How do you buy buyers? Well, you bring your capital, you track them. So that's I, super B. And then buyers sometimes just exit. And that's the delta part. So the capital B, for stock of buyers, that's a stock variable. That's like a stock of your human capital, or stock of physical capital, or stock of your wealth, right? So that get accumulated, right? We fundamentally live in an economy where things accumulate. Accumulation is extremely important. So that is the math. Okay, not too bad, right? Okay, I know it's looks a little scary. All right. Now let me give you the second piece of the big idea. Okay, it takes two pieces. Remember, what I've talked about is the central decision. Well, it's the platform. It's decentralized community, but remember, the blockchain started with somebody like Vitalik who set it up. You know, it's not like just out of nowhere. So there's somebody maximizing the blockchain value somewhere, okay? What's beautiful about this blockchain is you can write long-term contracts in a highly state-contingent way, okay? That's just a fancy, well, English way of saying what finance is all about, okay? So, now, what's really going on is on the blockchain, if you think about, forget about the bubbles and, if you think about the blockchain that has fundamentals, what's the fundamentals on the blockchain? It has to be economic transactions. There is no other way. If you don't have economic value add, The blockchain should be worth 0. Of course. In the real world, you have bubbles, speculators, a bunch of losers, and irrational people who just throw money, dumb money. That could go on for a while. But you probably don't want your business based on fundamentals that have very weak fundamentals, right? So now what's a natural way to think about economics on a platform? Well, it's about gains from trade. Again, going back to the basic economics, which is you got buyers and sellers. They don't know who they are. They're going to look around, marriage market, or whatever market you want to think about, okay? It's about search and match. Now, we're not the first one to talk about this, okay? It's a Nobel winning prize piece. It was started at least in the late 70s, early 80s. Okay, it's super well established in economics. And these 3 people got Nobel, I think, in 2010. Okay, so now, this is important, actually. What's interesting about search and matching is the following. Think about male and female. If the ratio is really off, as in some developing countries, it's pretty tough to be on the side with a lot whose ratio is larger than 1. If you take the male, typically male over female, the ratio is larger than 1 weekly. And for some countries, it's 1.05 or maybe 1.1, God knows what. It's super hard, right, if you have a lot of competitors. And that matching function exactly captures that. So buyer-sellers, change that to male-female. Okay, that story works. So that's what we call congestion. You have a lot of people going after a few deals, you know the price is going to be expensive, right, high. So that N function captures congestion, network negative externality, okay? Now, if you think about a lot of what economics is about when it comes to design issue, is about increasing efficiency, minimize distortion, cutting the fat out. It's much of what economics is about. Now, and here I'm just, remember it's a storytelling. I'm using equations to tell stories. So it's like, I run into somebody, do I like the product this guy makes or this gal makes? No, then I keep searching. If I like what she does, and then there's some surplus that's going to be realized between the 2 parties, and then we make a deal. And then we use smart contracts. This is all anonymous, unlike in the marriage market, because we're on the blockchain, but the idea is similar, okay? So you get the transactions done, and smart contracts take care of the transfers. Okay, so what this slide does, forget about all the gammas and alphas and all that. In plain English, it measures the efficiency, okay, of your blockchain, of the economy. That's how you want to think about it, okay? You want your blockchain to have a lot of transactions, right? Liquidity, right? And that's what we talk about, right? A lot of turnovers and so on, right? So that's what this slide is all about. Okay, more math. So why? Okay, so I got to do this in plain English. I think I can do it. Now, if you think about what you care as a buyer, what do you care? Okay, so let's think about this. Everything is in dollars, okay? So phi, the blue thing, is in dollars. And if I have 5 tokens, each token is worth $100, what's my total value? 500 US dollars. That's a very concrete object. That's my Z. Now, think about if you are a buyer, what do? Well, you have some opportunity cost, right? You know, your time is worth something. So that's on the left side. What's on the right side? You have everybody has a valuation. Buyer has a valuation. That little V is the buyer's valuation. So what the buyer does is say, the alpha is every period I can find a potential trading partner. This is all anonymous. That's alpha. If I meet somebody, what happens? I want to trade with this person. So alpha times the magenta, the lambda Z minus Z is the surplus. Why? Because I got to pay Z. Remember, Z is $500 in my example. Well, you pay using tokens, but it's worth $500. You're going to have to get something worth more than $500. So the lambda function is something more than $500. Lambda 500 is larger than 500 if Z equals 500. That's what the equation says. Okay? So then the question is, why do you want to hold my link tokens on my chain link? Because you want to use the tokens to settle transactions. Me, the platform designer, is a monopoly. You want to use my data, you use my link token. I don't take anything else. I know you don't care about link token. You only care about the link token to the extent you care about the US dollar valuation of that token. But hey, dude, you know, I'm a monopoly here. You got to use my link token. That's the idea. That's why tokens are valuable, even though tokens don't pay you any dividends, right? What's the standard finance teaching if you take Finance 101? Assets that never pay dividends are worth 0. If you say anything else, you get 0 points on your exam, right? Because it's all about discounting future cash flows. But here, tokens actually have no dividends. How can you be valuable? Well, because you're forced to use it. Because it creates value by facilitating transactions on the platform, blockchain. So you actually realize economic value gain. And that translates into valuation. So that's the causality. That because you can do something otherwise you could not have done. And well, that's why the platform is valuable. And the platform is using its power to extract monopoly rents, monetize the blockchain. Of course, in order for the blockchain to be successful, you cannot do this by yourself. That's why you got to engage the community, and that's where buyer stock B, seller stock S kick in. That's the logic. Okay, so it's all airtight. There's no BS. It's all mathematical, so you don't get to disagree once you buy into assumptions. The key is, do you buy into my assumptions or the story that I started early on? All right, carry cost. So think about this. If my opportunity cost is 10% a year, let's say, if I like your platform because you allow me to do something I want to do and I cannot do otherwise, I'm willing to let go a little of the 10%. So that last term, which I call carry cost, is how the platform using token to monetize its business. That's the business model. So that little r sub t is going to be the endogenous object that a tokenomics paper like mine should or have to deliver. Now, if you're a finance person, that equation looks awfully like what we call asset pricing equation. Variations of that are Black-Scholes and all these greatest models. 5 minutes? Okay, all right. So in the literature. Now, you can pin it down how much convenience yield. Okay, so what's the idea? The idea is the platform is decentralized. So there's a marketplace. Interest rate will arise as an equilibrium object to what? To clear the market, right? And then as a result, what's going to happen is that what you give up would have to equal to what you get. That's all that really is. In economics, we call that first order condition. All that really means just that's the condition that characterizes the demand for tokens. Why do people have demand for tokens? Because people use tokens to do something valuable. At least you think somebody else would do that. That's why anticipating that, you will actually hold your tokens. That's the economics. Okay, so that's the pricing. Yeah, this is in finance and economics, monetary economics and finance are actually pretty separate, I would say, by and large. This is an attempt to actually integrate monetary economics into finance, okay? All right, so I think I said everything here. Okay, so what this slide says, again, a lot of math here, but the bottom line is simple, okay? It says the platform is spending tokens, which are valuable, to optimally grow its platform. That's all these I's, IBs, IS's, and by the way, the first two terms are the money you monetize from new buyers. Okay, the first term on the second line are the return you're going to have to pay. You have to compensate for people using your platform. Okay, so anyway, so this just means every penny is accounted for. Okay, make sure that we did math right. Okay, accounting right. Okay, more math. I'm going to stop here. All right, I'm going to show you a couple of pictures to tell you stories. So the little b is buyer and seller ratio. Okay, so now thinking about this from buyer's perspective, okay, when do you want to be a buyer? Like if you're in the marriage market, if you're the only, I don't know, female or male, whatever, you know, and then you face a lot of people, your valuation is high, right? Because you're in high demand, okay? The market is highly uneven. That's what this picture says. Okay, the left picture says when B is close to 0, that means a lot of sellers relative to buyers. So buyers have the market power. So the valuation for tokens, that little Z, which I used $500 as a numeric example earlier, that's 7, 8. That's really high. Okay, what is convenience yield? In plain English, convenience yield is the tax. In effect, it's the tax apply the platform on the token holders. Okay? Why can the platform, so to speak, implicitly tax the token holders? Because platform, blockchain, is offering something useful for the users. You're getting economic gains on my platform. I, as the platform, will extract the surplus. Okay? That's how every centralized, decentralized, every platform works this way. Otherwise, there's no economics. So that convenience yield, okay? You may wonder what's the dot. The dot is, the red dot is the steady state, okay? So remember, the system is trying to get to the middle, okay? In this case, the steady state is 0.47, roughly. So you wanna be more or less in the middle because you don't want the markets to be too off balance. If the market is too uneven, it's no good, okay? Either there are too many buyers or too many sellers. You want a balanced outcome. Okay, what is this picture? This tells you how fast you want to grow your buyers and how fast you want to grow your sellers. I know that looks asymmetric for a good reason, because here we're focusing on the buyer side. Let me just focus on the buyer side so you get the main idea, then we'll talk about the rest. So when buyers, say, go back to my example, if there's only one buyer and you have 100 sellers, what do you think the platform should do? Take one buyer, turn that into 10, 15, 20, 30, and so on. So that's what this picture says. To the left, the growth rate on the buyer side, which is the vertical axis, is really high. As the little b, which is the ratio of buyers and sellers, decrease, the rate at which you're going to attract the new buyers can slow down because it's less efficient, it's less valuable. It's what we call decreasing return to scale, okay? More, when you go buy from 1 to 2, it's a lot more valuable than from 2 to 3 when you face 100 sellers, right? That's obvious, right? Diminishing return, right? So that's what this picture says, okay? Now, because of network negative externality, by the way, you may think network effect is all great, okay? Depends, right? In the marriage market, it's not. In a lot of markets, when they're unbalanced, the network effect generates congestion. So you have both positive network effect and negative network effect. In typical situations, they both exist, okay? But just for some applications, maybe the positive network effect can be the dominating force because you need to have critical mass and so on. Okay? But they're all in the model. So in other words, by the way, this is why valuation, one reason valuation of tokens and cryptos are so wild, because there's a huge amount of nonlinearity. Okay? The story, quantitative story that I'm putting up here is a simple story, actually. Okay? Despite that, you see a lot of nonlinearity and mathematical sophistication here. Okay. Yeah, so this is the matching rate. As buyer relative to seller increases, look at what happened to the matching probability. It's going down. That's what I mean by negative externality. You have a lot of folks looking for the same partner. Guess what? You're less likely to find one. That's what that picture says. Okay? And this just says the marginal surplus. Okay? So it's a little more subtle. I'm just going to skip that. You get the main idea. Okay. So now I want to put the valuation model on. So I'm going to show you how to put the dollar value on every single token or platform you give me. You give me, I could tell you the number. Okay, that's what we're going after. Okay, so how this works? Remember, little b is the ratio between buyers and sellers. Okay, so that's a measure of your network. Okay, I can look at the addresses and the activities and so on. Okay, I'll get a measure for that. And then I take that fancy f function for every seller. Okay, there's a valuation which is that little f. Okay, now remember I started with the Q theory, so then you have average and marginal. Okay, if you were a PhD student in economics, you would have to know that to pass your qualifying exam. But anyway, so let's move on. These are the valuation ratios. By the way, it's similar to something called market to book. That may sound more familiar to you. If you go to stock market, you say, oh, market to book ratio. That's very close, okay? Not exact, but very close. Okay, so anyway, so you use calculus, you get a bunch of derivatives. All right. So then you can look at this. So now let's give you some feel about it, okay? If you have very few buyers, what's the average value of each buyer? Based on this model, $20. Each buyer, okay, for every, the per unit valuation, okay, is 20. And of course, as little b goes up, the valuation is going to have to fall, okay, because you're no longer that scarce. You're no longer that valuable. I got a bunch of you. Who cares about one of you? But if you're one of the few in town, that's really valuable. Okay. And the marginal, just that, all that really means is the derivative. Because if you think about it, if you're a rational entrepreneurial, you want to think about the marginal conditions because you want to grow your platform. You want to say, if I spend X dollars, how much do I get, right? Okay, you're going to have to compute out your resource, corporate strategy, blockchain development strategy, that's what it is. Okay. All right, so here's the same picture for sellers. All right, so let me just wrap this up, okay? So hopefully you were not totally lost. So the story is very simple. Think about accumulation model, okay? What is a business? A lot of business is about building your brand. Brand is a capital. Here, your community is your capital. Community has buyers and sellers. They're stochastically managed, okay? So that's why we call it the Q. Why is that a tokenomics model? Because everything is settled in tokens, thanks to blockchain. There's no other way. You don't even get to quibble, okay? So that's why it's tokenomics. And then the platform, remember, was set up by somebody at the very beginning. It didn't just start from nowhere. Satoshi started Bitcoin. Somebody set it up. So that's why the designer is thinking through all this and to come up with a state contingent dynamic strategy, taking into account what the fundamentals are on the blockchain will drive its fundamental ultimate economics. And that's what the story is all about. So we are working on a bunch of things, like what about the competition between platforms? How do you think about the fees, gas fees, and all the other stuff? How do you finance this, right? Remember, in the story I'm telling, there's no VC. But you just heard from Vitalik and others that VC financing, matters, and other financing matters, crowdfunding matters, airdrops matter, and ICOs and all that. So we haven't got any of these in this particular paper. So we've got a checklist to go down the list to make this even more realistic. All right, thanks. Let me stop here.